Hello everyone and welcome back to another weather update. I hope y'all are doing well. Tonight we're going to be looking at our severe weather threat for today on May the 31st, and then we'll be taking a look at our upcoming severe weather threats on Saturday tomorrow and as well as Sunday, and then we'll take a little bit of a look at our general overall pattern for the continental U.S. at the towards the end of the video. So first, looking at our 01Z day one update for our convective outlook, we do have a slight risk into parts of some of the central U.S. and then down to the south in Texas. We do have a slight risk here in parts of central and parts of western, a little bit of western Texas there. And then we have a large marginal risk around that all the way from pretty much south central Texas all the way north into western Nebraska there. Then we have another marginal risk here and to parts of eastern Arkansas, down south into Mississippi, and parts of eastern Louisiana there. Looking at our tornado risk with this, we do have a small 2% tornado risk with this in far eastern Colorado there. Then looking at our wind risk, we do have a 15% risk here and a 5% surrounding all that from about south central Texas all the way up north into Nebraska there. Then looking at our 5% down here into Arkansas, that goes to the southeast into Mississippi and eastern Louisiana. Looking at our hail risk, we do have a 15% risk here, and then around that is a large 5% here. Then into Texas again, we have another 15% here, and then around that is just that large 5% as I was just talking about that surrounds both of those 15% risk. So for just right now, we're going to be looking at the 0ZHRRR model. So looking into mainly the central U.S. and into parts of Colorado and Oklahoma and Texas, then into Kansas and Nebraska. So over the next couple hours, you do have some storms moving into the panhandle of Texas, showing up on the 0ZHRRR, and those are currently coming through the panhandle of Texas at the moment as well. And then we have a few more somewhat isolated storms into eastern Colorado there, and then going throughout the next couple of hours into late tonight into very early tomorrow on Saturday. You still have those storms moving into the panhandle and slowly moving out of the panhandle, and then you have more storms that start to form into Kansas later in the night into early tomorrow, as well as storms into northwest Nebraska there. Then looking as you go throughout very early tomorrow, still have some of those storms into northwest Nebraska and even some into parts of Kansas there. And then we have our other storms moving into Texas that will continue to weaken throughout the night. And then going into very early tomorrow morning, you still have some storms lingering into Nebraska there, and they should finally start to weaken out by the early morning hours to mid-morning hours. Then looking back down south into some of these storms here into Kansas, these will diminish and fizzle out by early tomorrow. So right now, just mainly looking at Texas, and then we'll go to the east into Mississippi, Louisiana, and Arkansas. But just for right now, we're going to be looking at Texas. So as I was just talking about, those storms into the panhandle of Texas there, those will move in to the panhandle. They've already moved into the panhandle, but they will continue to move east, kind of southeast actually. And then this will be very late tonight into early tomorrow. And you still have those clusters moving out of the panhandle, moving in. And then these storms will definitely have the potential to produce some hail and definitely some straight line winds with any of these storms here. And then going into very early tomorrow, they'll weaken, and as you get into early in the mid and early morning hours, you do have some more clusters to try to develop, showing up on these 0ZHRRR into parts of eastern New Mexico there, and in the panhandle of Texas and Oklahoma, and those will probably fizzle out by the mid-morning hours tomorrow if that were to happen from the 0Z-HRRR. Now looking to the east into Louisiana, Mississippi, and Arkansas for that marginal risk out here. You do have quite a few storms here, mainly into large clusters throughout parts of Mississippi, and it looks like most of these, the stronger storms will be into parts of kind of southeastern to eastern Arkansas and to northern Mississippi. And then as you get later into the night, you could have more development of those storms into central Arkansas there, and then quite a few really developing as you get into Mississippi, and even a few possible into parts of Louisiana there, and then just widespread coverage of storms and showers as you get into very early tomorrow. And then still going into tomorrow morning, we'll talk about tomorrow's threat in just a second, because that, as you can see here, quite a few storms and just widespread coverage of storms throughout Mississippi, and even into showers parts of Tennessee there, and more storms into Alabama. We'll talk about that in just a second. Now looking at our day 2 outlook for tomorrow on Saturday, June the 1st. Quite a large slight risk into parts of the central U.S. here, and we have a large marginal risk surrounding that into parts of the central U.S. and parts of the deep and mid-south there. Looking at our tornado risk with this, we do have a 2% risk here. One is in southwestern and western Nebraska into a part of northwestern Kansas, northeastern Colorado there, and southeast Wyoming there. And then we have another one down here into southeastern New Mexico and far western Texas there. Looking at our wind risk with this, we do have a large 5% risk in the same areas I mentioned before, into the mid-south, some parts of the deep south, and around the end of the central U.S. And then our other risk here is our big 15% risk here into parts of the central and south central U.S. Looking at our hail risk with this, we do have a large 5% around that in the central U.S. And then we have two areas of hatched risk, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But we do have a large 15% risk that extends all the way south, starting into parts of western Nebraska there, all the way down into New Mexico and Texas. But looking at our hatch risk here, the hatch risk is a 10% or greater probability of 2-inch diameter hail or larger within 25 miles of a point in this hatched area with the dashed lines. So this hatched risk is from pretty much western Nebraska down south into parts, a tiny little bit of southeastern Wyoming there, into quite a large part of eastern Colorado there. Then looking down south, we just have this hatched risk, and this hatched risk is only into a part of western Texas there. Again, we'll be looking at the 0Z-HRRR, and then we're mainly going to be looking at the central U.S. now, then we'll go to the south central U.S., and then we'll go more towards the deep and mid-south, and we'll compare models here. And we'll first start by looking at the 0Z-HRRR. So we do have storms that try to form and begin to start forming into parts of western Kansas there about early to mid afternoon hours. And then going into the early and mid-evening hours, you do have storms trying to start to form into eastern Colorado and eastern New Mexico there, and then into parts of Oklahoma as well. And then you do have quite a few, some pretty much isolated into parts of Oklahoma and into Kansas there. Then these storms that take a while to get going on the 0Z-HRRR start to get stronger and intensify into parts of eastern Colorado and even Nebraska, as well as western Kansas and the panhandle of Oklahoma and Texas. Then as you go farther into the late evening hours, into the nighttime hours, you do have widespread coverage, quite a few storms into Kansas and the panhandle of Oklahoma, and some into central Oklahoma there, into the panhandle of Texas there, and into Nebraska. This will be late in the late evening hours tomorrow into the nighttime hours, and then quite a few storms here. Pretty messy mode of storms, but you will have some isolated, and that will have the potential for that brief tornado risk, and then we'll also have the hail risk and that wind risk too to watch out for as you get into tomorrow and then late tomorrow night. Now looking more toward the south central United States, we do have, I didn't talk about this earlier, but we do have a signal of an MCS showing up on the 0ZHRRR, and we'll compare the NAM with it in just a second. But looking here, the HRRR does show a MCS moving into the panhandle, through the panhandle of Texas and then into parts of western Oklahoma, and this shows it moving through about the strongest part of it, I would say, would be very early tomorrow, very early on Sunday, and then late tomorrow night, and we'll have to watch that for that coverage there of that MCS if it does happen. But we'll compare the NAM in just a second. But still, looking at our storms that form into Texas tomorrow, you will have that hail risk for sure, and that wind risk definitely with some of those storms in parts of western Texas there tomorrow. And then you just have quite a few, some isolated storms into western Texas, as well as parts of southeastern Texas there as you get into the mid and late evening hours tomorrow. And then by very late tomorrow night into early on Sunday, you will have those storms finally start to weaken into southern Texas there. Looking back at the central U.S., and we're looking on the 0Z 3 kilometer NAM here, and it does show a pretty similar idea of storms tomorrow across parts of the central U.S., and then we'll head back down to parts of Texas in a second to compare with the NAM, and then showing that MCS that would be into Oklahoma and Texas on the 0ZHRRR. The NAM shows it getting going quite a bit farther north into parts of the kind of northern Oklahoma, into parts of the eastern panhandle of Oklahoma. And if this were to happen, it would be very early on Sunday or late on tomorrow night, and then it would reach its peak on the 3 kilometer NAM probably into northern and the eastern panhandle. This will be something to watch as well. I probably would say this will change depending on how the models handle this tomorrow, so definitely something to watch with two different areas that show the MCS that moves through, but definitely a signal for an MCS for sure. But the HRRR does show it a little bit stronger, but that would be farther into Oklahoma and possibly Texas, but that'll be something to watch for sure. Now looking again at the 3 kilometer NAM, definitely the same general idea. We're not going to be talking about the MCS, but same idea with those storms and that hail threat into western Texas tomorrow, into late tomorrow evening, into tomorrow night. And those storms look like they'll be pretty long-lived. Most of them will be into parts of western Texas, and then even central and southern Texas. And definitely just to watch those for sure for that hail risk tomorrow. But the NAM is generally pretty similar with all those storms there. You'll just have to watch that MCS and where it might go tomorrow into Sunday. Now looking back on the 0ZHRRR, we'll mainly be looking at the deep and mid-south for tomorrow on Saturday. So by the early morning hours, you will have a widespread coverage of storms into Mississippi and Alabama, and this will mainly be with a wind threat with this, and there really won't be a hail risk or a tornado risk with any of these storms at this time. But looking into parts of eastern Mississippi and Alabama, quite a few storms here into the panhandle of Florida, into southern Alabama there. And then I would think there might be an upgrade to a level 2 out of 5 slight risk tomorrow, maybe down into southern Alabama and maybe the panhandle of Florida tomorrow possibly, because these storms do look quite a bit stronger down to the south, and that would definitely promote that wind threat with any of these storms and clusters. But definitely something to watch as well, because these storms do look pretty strong throughout most of the day tomorrow into tomorrow evening across parts of the southern U.S. Now looking at the 0Z 3 kilometer NAM here, we do have pretty much the same thing showing up. And then you do have those storms that get into Mississippi and Alabama here. And the coverage is not as widespread as you had on these 0Z8 RRR, but you do have still those stronger storms into maybe Mississippi and then into southern Alabama and the panhandle of Florida. But on these 3 kilometer NAM here, it does have kind of that line and those clusters staying over pretty much southern Alabama and the panhandle of Florida tomorrow morning, so you'll have to watch that. I wouldn't be surprised as well if there's definitely some flash flood warnings tomorrow if you have these storms staying over these areas for a long period of time. So probably a little bit of a flooding risk with this as well, but same idea with the 3 kilometer NAM as well. Now looking at our day 3 outlook on Sunday, June the 2nd, we do have a pretty large slight risk here into parts of the central and north central U.S. here, and a large marginal risk around that from the Canada and North Dakota border all the way south into parts of west central Texas there. And then looking at our probabilistic, same thing here, a 15% is automatically a slight risk, and then our 5% is automatically a marginal risk. And this outlook will be updated tomorrow morning. Let's see, yeah, it'll be updated actually in just a couple of hours, so it will be tomorrow morning, but still this update will be updated with our tornado hail and our wind risk as well tomorrow. Just looking real quick on the 18Z ZGFS, we're looking at Sunday real quick in the central and north central US here. So looking on Sunday, we do have those storms forming and getting going into parts of North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, and into parts of Minnesota as well. And then we'll have to watch later on Sunday night and to see if these storms kind of form into a line here and see how that storm mode really gets going. So definitely will be something to monitor as you get into tomorrow, and we'll get into more of those short range models, and we'll be able to take a better look at this for Sunday's severe weather threat. So now looking just at our overall pattern, and just for the next couple of days, throughout the next several days, looking at our jet stream here, as you look into today, like today and then into tomorrow, you have that little bit of a trough there, shortwave trough there, and then as you go farther into the next couple of days, you can see that, let's see if we can see, yeah, there's our shortwave trough on Sunday, and then you're going to have this pattern where you'll have this ridge in the western United States, and then we'll probably get maybe some troughing later into next week, and that may help with another severe weather threat, but we don't know really where yet. But our general pattern will be a high in the western United States, and we'll have warming temperatures in parts of the western United States, and then we'll have a pattern where these lows will pretty much ride this right here, and you'll have these lows towards more of the northern U.S. and kind of the Great Lakes. But then as we get even further out, we'll have to watch this pattern just to see how it evolves. And this is pretty far out, but so you would just have a pattern where these low pressures would rise right here, and you'll just have to watch this pattern as we get into early next week and then the coming weeks after that. That's going to be it for tonight's update. It was shorter than normal, but it was pretty short overall. But I do appreciate all of y'all watching, and I probably will have maybe a more in-depth forecast and update tomorrow night. But tonight I was just pretty tired, so I had to do a kind of a shorter update here. But I do appreciate all of y'all watching again, and I hope all of y'all stay safe if you live in any of these severe weather areas and the locations that will be affected by severe weather throughout the next couple of days. But I hope all of y'all have a great Friday night or a great Saturday morning whenever y'all are watching.